With all the good that Spider-Man does, there also have to be some bad moments to even it all out. Hey, I don't make the rules, that's just how the world works. Here are 10 examples to prove it. At number 10 is when Spider-Man has his eye ripped out and eaten. Starting off the list on a light note, this moment comes from a 2005 storyline called The Other, in which the supervillain Morlun returns from the dead to kill Spider-Man. And at this point in the story, Spidey is weakened, leaving him vulnerable to some more gruesome beatdowns such as this one. Morlun basically catches up to Spider-Man and beats him up within an inch of his life, and before taking off, gouges out Spidey's left eye and devours it right in front of him, saying, delicious. It's a state we're not used to seeing Peter Parker in, so beaten down and dismembered like this, so I figured it had to go on the list. At number 9 is the time when Spidey gets buried alive by Kraven. This devastating moment takes place in the Kraven's Last Hunt storyline when Kraven tracks down and shoots Spider-Man, seemingly killing him and then burying him in a grave on the grounds of his mansion. When the job seems to be done, Kraven then takes on the mantle of Spider-Man himself and terrorizes New York as a much more violent and unforgiving version of the hero. Luckily, Spider-Man wakes up after some troubling nightmares, realizing that he had only been tranquilized all along. He gets to Kraven and takes him down, but still needs to face the challenge of rebuilding his damaged reputation. At number 8 is the horribly infamous event of, trigger warning, Spider-Man and Mary Jane losing their baby in the late stages of pregnancy. Luckily, it's later revealed that the baby was actually born happy and healthy, but had been stolen by Norman Osborn. However, they don't know that, and neither do the readers for a while. Before this strange twist is revealed, we're left with one of the darker moments in Spider-Man franchise history, and it's no picnic. It really puts an otherwise invulnerable neighborhood hero, and of course Mary Jane herself, in a very shocking and very real crisis. And not to mention, it leads to the beginning of the decline of Peter and Mary Jane's marriage altogether. That Norman Osborn really plays hardball on the psychological game, doesn't he? At number 7, we have the time when Ultimate Spider-Man dies. In the second volume of the Ultimate storyline, launched in the year 2009, the Earth 1610 Peter Parker is behind the Ultimate Spider-Man mask, and on one fateful day, he actually loses his battle against the Green Goblin and the rest of the Sinister Six. Between issues 156 and 160, we see Spider-Man face off against a group of brutal bad guys, mostly right in front of Aunt May and Mary Jane. The whole time, he's met with so much firepower that he even needs Aunt May to step in at one point with a revolver, taking out Electro before he's able to finish off Peter himself. What's most devastating about this moment is that this isn't even some older, more mature iteration of Spider-Man. He's just a teenager when this happens, and when he dies, it just leaves a mark that stays with you. Good thing Miles Morales is there to take over for him, but it still doesn't fully soften the blow of what happens. At number 6, we have the time when a zombie Spider-Man eats Aunt May and Mary Jane. On Earth 2149, there happens to be a virus that has taken over all the Marvel heroes, turning them into zombies. And that, of course, includes Peter Parker. And before he knows he's infected, he swings back home to warn Aunt May and Mary Jane about the infection. But while he's there, he succumbs to the virus himself and goes feral, killing Mary Jane first and then turning on Aunt May. But this isn't any typical zombie infection. Spider-Man is totally sentient and knows exactly what's going on while he's doing it. He just can't control himself. So, in the moment when he turns on Aunt May, he's actually warning her to leave the room, knowing that he's gonna end up turning on her if she doesn't. It's brutal. At number 5, I'm putting the time when Peter loses his parents again. Well, he doesn't really lose them twice, but he goes through the experience of losing them twice. When both his parents seem to make a sudden and mysterious reappearance, Peter Parker can't help but be ecstatic. He's told that they'd been held captive in Algeria his whole life at the hands of Red Skull, and that they were back and here to stay. But right as Peter finally comes around and accepts this as the truth, it gets revealed that they aren't his parents at all, but androids created by Chameleon, a plan orchestrated by Harry Osborn. Spider-Man gets seriously traumatized by this and has a nervous breakdown, and what's worse is that somehow in the same instance, Aunt May learns about Peter's identity as Spider-Man, complicating and changing his life even further. At number 4 is one of the classics that we all know about, the murder of Uncle Ben. This is the seminal awful moment in Spider-Man history and couldn't be left off the list because it's what drives Peter Parker to become who he becomes. In a way, I wanted to put this one further back on the list because it also brings a lot of good to the innocent people of the world and to fans of Spider-Man's work. It also brought us all the iconic saying, with great power comes great responsibility, which sort of transcends the Spider-Man comics entirely. So, I wanted to put this entry at number 9 or even 10, but then I thought about how it made Peter Parker himself feel and I realized maybe that was a little selfish of me. So, it's at number 4. This event takes place way back in Amazing Fantasy issue 15 in 1962, which also marks the first time we see Spider-Man make his debut. At number 3, we have the time when, trigger warning again, Peter Parker gives Mary Jane cancer in the Spider-Man Reign miniseries. And the way this happens makes it even more brutal. In fact, so brutal I won't even spell it out here because this channel needs to stay PG, so you can Google it if you want to know the details, but I will do my best. Basically, in a distant, gritty alternate future, we're introduced to a world where an elderly Peter Parker is struck with guilt over his accidental killing of Mary Jane. But this isn't because of some successful attempt on her life by a supervillain, nor did Spider-Man accidentally drop her from a rooftop or something like that. Let's just say that while being intimate with her, he didn't realize that certain properties that came in contact with MJ turned out to be so radioactive as a result of his powers that it made her sick. And after too many instances of this radioactive contact, MJ got so sick that she passed away. So, there we go. At number 2, we have the classic, the iconic, the horribly iconic, like iconic in a bad way, death of the MCU Peter Parker in Infinity War. Now, Peter Parker gets killed at the hands of Thanos in both the comics and the movies, but it's pretty much unanimous that the MCU moment is a lot sadder all around. We all know how brutal it was to watch such a young iteration of Peter Parker fade away at the end of the movie in the way that he does. And even though that isn't actually the end for Spider-Man, it is a really shocking reminder that even the most lovable and seemingly untouchable heroes can meet an end on a dime like this. It's just a bleak moment and one that will always be known as one of the worst moments in Spider-Man history. Finally, at number 1 is the gut-wrenching moment when Spider-Man accidentally kills Gwen Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man number 121. When she's kidnapped by the Green Goblin and taken to the Brooklyn Bridge, Norman Osborn lets go, and we all watch her fall to her death. But Spider-Man gets to her just in time, so he thinks, spinning a web that catches her ankle and stops her mid-fall. Although we all know what happens next, which ends up haunting Peter Parker for years to come. The whiplash that Gwen's body experiences from the sudden change in velocity snaps her neck, killing her instantly. Although this isn't actually Spider-Man's fault, it can be seen how something like this could plague someone's existence with guilt for the rest of their life. And to be easier on Spidey, the Green Goblin does claim that the fall would have killed Gwen before she hit the ground anyway, meaning that possibly her neck didn't break, but the idea online is that her neck breaks from the whiplash, and I haven't seen it any other way. So that's what I'm sticking with. I wish it wasn't that way, but it seems like that's what happens. Either way, this is a horribly iconic moment in the comics and probably the first thing that a real Spidey fan thinks of when they're asked to name one of the worst moments in Spider-Man history. Alright, that was the list for today. Thank you for watching. Please comment below with anything I missed. As usual, I'll do my best to respond to you down there. This has been Top 10 Nerd. I've been your host, Ben Ball. You know the rest.